Welcome to the Roy Morgan overview of trust and distrust in not-for-profit, or more specifically, the charity sector in Australia. Roy Morgan is best known as Australia's leading consumer research and political polling company, but we also do extensive social research for government, charities and other not-for-profits. I'll talk about the not-for-profit sector shortly, but we're talking about trust. So what actually is trust? It's important to understand trust before we explore how it applies to specific brands or industries. In a nutshell, trust is the foundation of all human connections. It gives business leaders and politicians license to navigate in uncertain times and to take swift, decisive action when disaster strikes. Trust is the underpinning foundation of brand reputation. Now, this seems a simple enough aphorism, but it's much more than a useful tagline. And as evidenced by the insights I'll share shortly, it impacts donations to not-for-profits. As the foundation of brand reputation, trust has a positive material impact on a brand. It goes way beyond comms and onto the balance sheet. Take the global consumer goods brand Unilever. More than 3/4 of Unilever's market cap is created by trust and brand reputation. That's 100 billion euros. It's a lot of trust. But it's distrust where our deepest fears, pain and betrayal surface. Roy Morgan data on distrust and our own lived experience since 2018 reveals that distrust can destroy a brand's reputation and actually create the opposite effect to that enjoyed by Unilever. Medibank, for instance, suffered a catastrophic data breach late last year, and on the back of soaring distrust, lost $1.6 billion off its market value. The impact of distrust on donations to not-for-profits is significant, and distrust exists for some not-for-profits or charities, and even for the sector in general. So how do we measure trust and distrust? Well, we're Roy Morgan, so we conduct a survey, a continuous survey. We've just entered our 6th year of asking 2,000 different Australians each and every month which brands they trust and which brands they distrust. We also ask them why they trust or distrust those brands, and we record exactly what they say in their own words, and we then use AI to code those words. So this research is open-ended and unaided. That means for people who nominate a brand, it's so top of mind that they put that brand ahead of all the other brands swirling around in their consciousness. We at Roy Morgan then calculate a net trust score or a net distrust score for each brand by subtracting their distrust score from their trust score. This creates a full picture of how the brand is tracking, and it also allows us to benchmark each brand against other brands and industry by industry. So, which brands are most trusted in Australia? That is to say, which have the highest net trust scores? Well, Woolworths is the most trusted commercial brand in Australia and has been since June 2020, when as COVID spread, it raced past Bunnings. The remainder of the top 20 is dominated by retailers. 3 banks also make the top 20, with Bendigo Bank being the most trusted. The Commonwealth Bank is interesting. It recently entered the top 20 most trusted brands for the first time, enjoying a remarkable improvement after being deeply distrusted since the Banking Royal Commission in 2019. The reason Australians trust brands really comes down to the basics of doing business or doing good business. For example, treating the customer well and delivering a good quality product or service. These are the bread and butter of keeping customers or clients happy and go a long way to building trust and brand equity. But trust goes beyond the basics. Woolworths is the most trusted brand in Australia, largely because the CEO and his whole team stepped up during COVID. They gave Australians exactly the kind of support we needed, and in return, we trusted them. But as we at Roy Morgan know only too well, trust is not the whole picture. Let's now look at the dark side of the coin: toxic and corrosive distrust. So which are the most distrusted brands in the country? Well, Facebook has been the most distrusted commercial brand ever since we began measuring distrust way back in late 2017. Much of Facebook's distrust comes from issues around data privacy, including the Cambridge Analytica scandal in 2018. But distrust in Facebook runs even deeper than that. We asked Australians if they thought social media did more harm than good, and the vast majority said yes. And that, of course, also includes Twitter and TikTok, which are also in the top 20 most distrusted brands. I just mentioned the Medibank cyber attack, and here it shows up as the 7th most distrusted brand in Australia. But look at Optus, in 2nd place. Its data breach distrust is so huge, it's pulled the entire telco industry with it, and telco's now become the most distrusted industry in the economy. Interestingly and incredibly importantly, scandals that occurred some time ago, including the Harvey Norman JobKeeper scandal and the Rio Tinto Juukan Gorge scandal, still have vivid recall among Australians and continue being punished in the distrust stakes. We have long memories for these things. So looking at the top reasons Australians give for distrusting brands, the number one reason is a perception that brands are too motivated by profit. Of course, there's nothing wrong with a business making a profit, but when they're perceived as pursuing profit ruthlessly or even deviously, this really creates distrust. And while not in the top 5 reasons, distrust in brands for not protecting privacy has soared recently, following the highly publicised data breaches. Look at the comment on Optus that says their cybersecurity measures are woeful. And importantly, Optus doesn't acknowledge this or accept responsibility for it. Let's now turn to the all-important not-for-profit or charity sector. So what do we know about this sector? Well, the news is mostly good. In our risk monitor, we measure the net trust and distrust scores of sectors by rolling up the mentions of each brand within the sector, as well as any mentions of the industry in general. That is, everyone that simply says, I trust or distrust charities without nominating a specific brand. And over the last 12 months, there were around 600 mentions of brands or the charity sector in general. That's about 3,000 since we began measuring trust and distrust more than 5 years ago. So where does this sector rank relative to other sectors? Well, it's right up there among the most trusted sectors, in 5th position. In fact, it's jumped 1 ranking in the past 12 months. The sector records more trust than distrust. Trust is shown in green and distrust in red, placing it firmly in net trust territory. That said, while the sector remains among the most trusted, its net trust score has declined from the high it achieved in mid-2020. Also of great interest, when we look at how high net worth individuals, that's those people with more than $1 million in savings and investments, feel about brands within the charity sector or the sector in general, we see there's been a growing divide between the well-off and the general population. In the last 6 months, they were tracking fairly consistently before, but in the last 6 months, the net trust score for the charity sector has been steady for the general population, but has been lifting for those with high net worth. This is really encouraging for the sector at a time when the average person is struggling with the rising cost of living and may struggle to donate as much to charity as before. It's these high net worth individuals who'll be the key to getting charitable organisations through this really difficult period. We can also reveal a strong correlation between the amount of money people give to charity and their trust in the sector, with those who give more being more likely to have trust in charities. Although even those who don't give to charity at all have more trust than distrust in the sector. This sector really does have a high level of goodwill. Of course, this analysis poses the question, what comes first, trust or the donation? We would say trust is compulsory before a philanthropist hands over money to a charity, but when they do, they also create a relationship with that charity, and that in turn generates trust, creating a virtuous circle. Perhaps unsurprisingly, there's also a very close relationship between the value of a donor's savings and investments and the amount they donate to charity. What's probably a little more surprising is that this relationship isn't proportionate. Across the sector, double the wealth doesn't equate to double the amount donated to charity. We had a look at the percentage of people who donate to charity in a 12-month period across some key demographics. What we see is that women are more likely to donate than men, and older people more likely to donate than younger Australians. This ties in with the previous chart we just saw, which showed the amount given to charities increases as wealth increases. And we know wealth tends to increase with age. Stepping back now and looking at the individual components of trust and distrust that go into that net trust score for the charity sector, what we see is that there's a lot more green on this chart than red. So more trust than distrust. That's evidence that the sector is much more trusted than distrusted. As I mentioned earlier, however, trust has been decreasing since mid-2020, and it reached a new low in January. But offsetting that, distrust has also declined, but not quite enough to stop the net trust score from declining. So let's now look at why. Why Australians trust charities? In their own words, what we see coming through is an appreciation for the work that charities do, their willingness to help others, and their honesty and integrity. Rolling up these verbatim reasons that respondents give us for trusting charities and kind of analysing them and categorising them into key themes, the number one reason we find that people trust charities is integrity and ethical behaviour. Community-mindedness and the good work they do on the ground also resonates with Australians. So now to the other side of the coin, the distrust side. We know, as I said earlier, that trust far outweighs distrust in the sector, but some people still distrust individual charities and some distrust the sector in general. And as we see on this slide, most of the distrust stems from charities lacking transparency and the feeling that money's not always going where it was intended to go by the donor. For example, the money goes to those involved in the management of an organisation, and only a very small percentage of that goes to the children in need. It was exposed many years ago. This is still a really strong issue. These are similar to the reasons people give when they mention distrusting the entire sector. But they also mention for the sector, they don't pay taxes and they avoid penalties. And one respondent said highly paid CEOs paying commissions to fundraisers results in little money raised going to the advertised cause. Once again, rolling up these reasons into key themes shows the dominant reason for distrust in the sector is around perception of some charities being too greedy, money not ending up where it's supposed to. And this is a classic case of generous Australians feeling foolish they trusted too much. In summary, the charity sector's doing well overall when it comes to trust and distrust. In the current climate, with the cost of living crisis, the sector should take comfort from the fact that they're more trusted by those who can most afford to give. However, keeping an eye on distrust perceptions is essential. High net worth individuals think and act differently from others, and this includes the trust and distrust space. This presents a real opportunity for charities to continue to grow and increase their funding base to be able to continue to do the good work that they do. So how do brands continue to build trust? In our 5 years that we've talked about of measuring trust and distrust, we at Roy Morgan have discovered 5 key ways that brands build and maintain trust and eliminate or minimise distrust. These include responsiveness and problem solving, a community bias, skills and product knowledge, and clear and consistent communication, and decency. Every charity or not-for-profit organisation should practice these 5 trust pillars with a particular focus on the development and daily expression of a decency principle. That brings this short webinar to a close. Contact Roy Morgan for more insights on the charity and not-for-profit sectors. Just ask Roy Morgan. And don't miss our previous and upcoming webinars. We bring you the latest results on trust and distrust, sharing some of the best and worst practice examples and how different sectors are performing. You're also welcome to subscribe to our YouTube channel for a whole range of these and other Roy Morgan data and insights. Thank you for the opportunity to share these insights with you today. See you next time.